What's up, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls around the world? I would like to welcome you back to the Real Talk with Zuby podcast. On today's episode, we have got on another entrepreneurial mind. This is Asad Shah. He is an Amazon consultant to startups, and he's done a whole bunch of interesting stuff, which we're going to get into. So welcome to the show, man. How you doing?
I'm great, man. Thanks for having me on. How's everything?
Yeah, all is good, man. All is good. It's a little bit late over here where I am right now. A little bit tired, but it's been a very productive day. So I'm all positive. I'm all upbeat. Hopefully you can't hear the tiredness in my voice.
No, not at all. You're good.
And how's everything with you?
Everything's great, man. It's a beautiful day here in LA. It's 1 o'clock in the afternoon. I'm excited to be on the podcast. I'm going to have some fun and then go and probably lay out by the pool for the rest of the day. Take advantage of this heat.
Living the dream, man. Living the dream. So
Yeah.
I've done a really brief intro there, but why don't you introduce yourself to the audience and people who don't know you?
Sure. So my name is Asad. I'm 28 years old. I live in Los Angeles. I am currently an Amazon consultant. I run a marketing agency, which is basically just me. I consult to different types of startups, mostly in the consumer electronics space. I'm also, I guess you could say I'm an e-commerce entrepreneur. I've done that for a while, and that's mostly what I'm doing now, and just focusing on financial independence and location independence. That kind of sums up the last couple of years of my life, and where I'm going in the future.
Awesome, man. So before we get into the future, let's take it to the past, man. So tell us a little bit about you. Are you originally from Los Angeles? Is that where you grew up, or have you lived in a whole bunch of different places?
No, so I was actually born in Pakistan.
Mm-hmm.
When I was born in 91 in Pakistan. When I was 6, my family moved to Toronto. We were in Toronto for a couple months, and then we moved to Calgary, which is another major city in Canada, closer to the West Coast. I was in Calgary. We were in Calgary for about 4 years. When I was 10, we moved to a small town called Fairfield in California, which is closer to, it's about an hour north of San Francisco. And then not long after that, we moved to Fremont, California. And that's where I stayed from the time I was about 10 to 22. Then I left for college down in Southern California, and I've been in Los Angeles ever since then. So moved across 3 different countries over the course of 5 or 6 years. I would say Fremont is probably my home. It's where I spent the most amount of my time, but I always knew I'd end up in Los Angeles. As a kid, I wanted to really be an actor and a comedian. That goal kind of changed a little bit. Now I'm focused more on entrepreneurship, but LA was always kind of the goal, so I made it here a couple of years ago. But yeah, basically kind of grew up all over the world.
Awesome, man. So tell us a little bit more about that. You wanted to be an actor or a comedian, you said, and now you're doing, entrepreneurship in the online and tech world. So how did that happen?
So as a kid, I think it was just kind of something that it's a little sad, I'd say. I didn't think there was anything I could do job-wise when I was a kid. Like even as like 6, 7, 8 years old, I was like, my dad's an engineer, my mom was a doctor. I never thought I could do anything like that. So kind of over time, the thing I realized about myself was I was always really shy growing up, but when I got to know people, I'd love to entertain them and keep them laughing and smiling and having fun. And as I started to learn what these things were, I figured that was a good route for me because I didn't think I had any marketable skills to do anything else. And I think a lot of it was just kind of that jest as a kid where you want to be famous, you want that, that fame and fortune or whatever. And that's kind of what the goal was. But so growing up, I had crippling social anxiety, and it got worse with age. So it kind of started to move away from that. And I had a couple of years where I wasn't really doing anything. I was working, going to school, wasn't really getting anything done. And I kind of stumbled upon Amazon in college because I couldn't find a job. And so from there, I started to learn this kind of stuff just on my own. And then I joined the startup ring and, did really well there. And then from there, it just kind of made sense and it worked. So I kind of put everything else on hold for a bit, really focused down on this, which was like last summer is when I really took the plunge into doing my own thing. But since then, now that I've kind of reclaimed my time, what's happened is that I kind of had like a heart to heart with myself a couple months ago and sat down and thought about what I really wanted to do and realized that while entrepreneurship is fun, I've always kind of gone back to something more creative. So I think I've spoken a little bit about this on Twitter. I'm going to start to focus more on kind of something more creative. Maybe not try so much to be like a famous comedian or actor, but I'm definitely going to get into music more often, like more into music, and also from there focusing on just kind of more creative endeavors and creative pursuits.
Okay. So there's a whole bunch of stuff there that you kind of went through really quick there. So you said you started learning Amazon stuff. Like, what does that mean?
So I was studying international business and marketing in college,
Mm-hmm.
and I was learning specifically importing and exporting. And a friend of mine said, "Hey, why don't you learn how to do this for Amazon? There's guys teaching it online." This is like 2015.
Mm-hmm.
So I decided to try it. I figured it was a good way to make some money, especially because I couldn't find a job. And then I kind of just fell down the rabbit hole. I took a course by these guys called Startup Bros, learned a lot from them, and then created my own brand and started selling it on Amazon and having some fun with that.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that kind of started from like my interest was kind of peaked based on what I was studying in school, and also, just born of the situation where I had to make money and I didn't know, the traditional ways of making money weren't really working out for me.
Sure. And what was the first product that you sold on Amazon?
So the first successful one that I had was a brand that was mostly athletic wear. So like compression sleeves, knee pads, stuff like that. I had a couple that failed before that one found any success.
Okay, man. Because I'm interested. I always like to, on this podcast, I always try to get into the nuts and bolts of stuff. Because once you've done something already, it can be easy to be like, yeah. So I kind of just went, I did that, and then people are like, wait, but how? Like I get it with my music. If I'm giving people like the quick intro, I'll be like, yeah, I did that, and I'm independent and sold 25,000 albums, and they're like, wait, hang on, like how? Wait, go back a second. Yeah. Okay, so are you still doing the Amazon FBA stuff? Obviously, your Twitter handle is, based on Amazon FBA. So is that still something that you are doing primarily or on the side, or what's the situation with that now?
So Amazon's been, I'd say, like the biggest part of my life for 5 years now. But no, so when I graduated, I was selling my own brand, and I got the job at Ring, and it was basically like, hey, you can't do what I was hired to do for them. I couldn't do outside of work. So I had to get rid of all my products, like liquidate everything and sell it, which made sense at the time. And I took this job, and then, so I was there for about 2 years, and that was kind of, that was their deal. And then I joined another startup. They had the same rule. And it wasn't until November that I was actually free from that restriction to do it on my own.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of when I hopped on Twitter and started doing all this stuff. So me personally, I don't have my own brand on Amazon right now. I manage a bunch of clients' brands. So I'm definitely still involved, but as far as my own product, I don't have one yet. I'm working on 2 different products with actually people I met on Twitter.
Mm-hmm.
So the goal is to launch those by probably before Q4 this year.
Okay, man. And tell us a little bit more about the work you did for Ring. What were you brought on to do for them?
So it was funny because when I applied for that job, I applied for a growth analyst role, which was, I didn't know what it was. I just thought it was something that I could try to do. And they called me and they said, I talked about how I grew my Amazon account, and they said, they were like, you're not qualified for this position at all. It was a very technical role.
Okay.
But they said, hey, you know what? They said, we haven't posted this publicly, but we need an Amazon account manager. So if you want to come and interview for that role. And I was like, yeah, for sure. I went in, I didn't think much of it. But it turns out they had interviewed 2 guys from Tesla before me, and they'd been looking for someone for 6 months, and nobody was really qualified. And then I went in and I was kind of qualified. So I took the role, and it was wild. It was really like Ring was doing pretty decent numbers with them. But the relationship was really strained. It was like two people who hate each other, but they both make a lot of money together. So I think it was like I was like a kid thrown into the middle of a divorce, and I had to fix the relationship. And then from there, so I fixed the relationship between the two, worked on that, and then started looking at how to optimize and test different things on the Amazon marketing side. And I learned quite a bit. I learned quite a bit on my own. But I had a lot of great mentors there as well. So it was, for me, it was kind of this holistic approach to learning sales, learning relationship management, optimization, scaling, and everything all together. And just kind of putting Ring in front of as many people as possible on Amazon, to just scale from, like 8 million to 16 and then to 56. And then 2018, I was on track to do 100 million
Wow.
on Amazon. Yeah. And then Amazon bought Ring.
On Amazon alone?
Yeah, on Amazon alone.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So tell people a little bit more about Ring who aren't familiar with it.
So Ring is a startup that was founded in 2012. It's a video doorbell. So you would just plug, if this was a video doorbell, you would just plug it, put it on your front door, and then it has motion detection. So if I walk up to it, it'll detect that I'm there, and it'll be connected to your phone, and you'll be able to go live on your phone through the app and talk to me and see and speak to whoever's at your door. Sure. So basically, you can answer the door from wherever you are. So that's what it started off as, just that doorbell, and now they've got security cameras and then internal home monitoring and everything else.
Awesome, man. So in terms of where you are now then, so you said you want to start getting involved in some more creative stuff. So are you, you mentioned music. Do you make music?
So I don't right now. I'm totally new to music.
Okay.
I grew up in a very religious household, very strict Muslim household.
Okay.
But music was always kind of there. And I was 8 years old and I found this old guitar in a dumpster. And I brought it home and I was trying to learn on it. And I think a week later I came back and my dad made me throw it out. He was like, no music in this house.
Oh, no.
Yeah. I had to hide my MP3 player when I was a kid. And I listened to it under the car, it was like that. It was bad. So I don't make music right now. Actually, last year, and this is something I've talked a little bit about on Twitter. All my friends right now are DJs. They're getting a little bit bigger. I'm sure you've heard of EDC in Vegas. It's a pretty big festival.
Yes, I have.
Yeah. So two of my friends are actually playing that on smaller stages this year, but they're playing it. And so I'm getting more into music now, and that's kind of my thing, to reclaim my time and learn production and all this kind of stuff and finish this project that I started working on with a friend of mine last year.
Okay. What's that? And what's that project? What does that entail?
It's going to be a lot of, the music itself is going to revolve around experimental bass and liquid drum and bass and hip hop and kind of old school instrumental hip hop.
Okay.
When lyrics actually mattered.
I hear that. They still do. As far as I'm concerned anyway.
Yeah. Well, they've always mattered. I guess I should say when lyrics were a little bit more articulate.
Yeah.
Which they haven't been in a long time in the mainstream. So it's gonna be kind of revolved around that, and it's but the way that I want to do it, my vision for it was kind of similar to how Childish Gambino did Because of the Internet, where there was a visual component to it and a screenplay. So you kind of, I don't know if you saw that, but it's you would read the screenplay and then play a track, and the track would go with the video. And so you would watch the video, and it was all kind of like this story. So I'm kind of putting, my goal is to kind of have all that done together.
Okay. Oh, that does sound interesting, man. Anything music related, it's always going to pique my interest,
Yeah, of course. I'll definitely send stuff to you when I'm ready.
Yeah, man, absolutely. So is that so you were talking about reclaiming your time with that project. Is that something you want to move into professionally then, or are you kind of just toying around with it to begin with, or what's the kind of greater plan for that?
I think it's more so right now just to kind of have fun, have some fun with it. So the project started with, it all started from conversations with my friend Josh, who was very, very talented musically. And he didn't believe that I had no formal training in music. He thought I was full of it. But I was like, no, I've never done anything musically at all. And so he wanted to start teaching me how to produce so we could work on stuff together. And Josh actually passed away in December of last year.
Sorry to hear that.
Yeah, I appreciate that. It was wild, man. But he had sent me some stuff he was working on. We were kind of talking about it, but I moved home briefly back to the Bay, and he was still in LA. So it's we didn't get a chance to really get to it. And then we were going to work on it when I got back, but he's gone now. So it was, it's something that I'm going to finish. And in terms of but it's I don't want to wait 5 years to do this, So my plan right now is to really go hard with e-commerce, so I don't have to spend 40, 50 hours a week working for someone else. I can spend that time. You can kind of come down to like 20 hours a week when you really focus and automate most of your life.
Mhm.
And then from there, just dump, just kind of become obsessed with production and learning everything, and kind of go from there and have some fun with it. So I wouldn't say I'm going to do it professionally in that sense. I'd love to kind of just probably do local shows and whatnot, and just kind of put it out there to the world and see what happens with it. I'm sure some people would love it, and if it gets big, it gets big. If not, I'm not. It's not necessarily something I'm going to push. It's more so just like a labor of love for my homie.
Yeah, man, I get you, man. I get you. That's cool, man. So I wanted to talk a little bit more about some of the, I guess, some of the differences. So you said you were born obviously originally in Pakistan, and then you lived in Canada. You're now in LA. So you also mentioned you grew up in a strict Muslim household with no music even. So like talk us. I'm just kind of curious about those transitions in those different places. Me myself, as I told you earlier, I grew up in the Middle East in Saudi Arabia, and then I went to boarding school and university here in the UK, and I'm now based here in the UK. Although I've traveled to a whole bunch of different countries. I think of 32, 33 countries now. But yeah, I always find it interesting to talk a little bit about, like, I don't know, I guess like cultural differences or things that you've experienced and some of those changes, because I imagine going from Pakistan to LA, that's like those are pretty different places in a lot of ways. So what's that been like?
Yeah, it's like it's worlds apart. So like when I was we left a couple weeks after my 6th birthday when we left Pakistan, and so I wasn't as into, like, I was a little bit kind of indoctrinated into that culture and everything a little, and
Mhm.
not as much as my brother, but it was, I don't remember the culture shock being too big going from Pakistan to Canada. I think I was very impressionable still.
Mhm.
And what was strange was I still remember being a little kid. I don't even know how I knew this, but when my parents told me we were leaving, I thought we were going to the States. I just knew America for some reason, but we were going to Canada, which I still remember it bummed me out when I found out at like 5 years old. I was like, damn, I don't want to go there. But it was interesting. It was a pretty big change. It was very different in terms of where we lived and then where we lived in Canada. And I didn't know this at the time, but we were totally broke. Like when we were in Toronto, we were on welfare, and I had no idea. I didn't know any better. And then we moved to Calgary, and things kind of like, it was great. It was fun. We lived in like student, like upperclassmen graduate housing, so there was a bunch of other kids there. And in that aspect, it was a great time. And this was when my parents were actually like less religious than they are. So like up until 10 years old, they weren't that religious. When I hit 10, it was like around that time is when they went balls out with it.
That's interesting.
Yeah. So I'd say the biggest cultural shifts, or like kind of the change, like now that I think about it, I honestly think that I felt the cultural shift so much less because my parents were so restrictive on us that I wasn't really exposed to much of it, but I think I'm trying to think of like what the major things were. I don't know that I really like, I assimilated pretty quickly. That's what I've noticed.
Yeah.
Like I was like, wherever we went, wherever we ended up, I was ready to kind of just like, not necessarily forget who I was, but take on what I needed to fit in. And it never really ended up happening. So it was strange. It was a big shift every single time. But I was honestly kind of in a bubble, so much so that I don't think I experienced it as much as other people might.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, no, that's interesting. I mean, with myself, for like a 10-year period of my life, I was essentially going back and forth between the UK and Saudi Arabia multiple times a year. So during school time or university time, I'd be here in the UK, and then after that, go back to Saudi, and kind of back and forth and back and forth. And yeah, I don't know. There are even some things now that I still kind of do the comparison, and I'm still not quite used to, right? So even little things like the prices of things, right? So in the UK, shoes like sneakers are really expensive, considerably more expensive than they are in the States even. And in Saudi, they were so cheap. So even now, if I'm looking at a pair of shoes, and I'm looking at them, they were like 80 or 90 pounds, and I still do the conversion in my brain, and I'm like,
Yeah.
no, I can't buy that. Like that's because I'm still like that's like triple
Yeah.
the price of like what
Right.
in my brain, in my mind it kind of should be. So
Yeah.
I still do those little comparisons, and then of course growing up in Saudi, the structure of the week. So the weekend was Thursday and Friday rather than
Oh, okay.
yeah. So Thursday and Friday is like the equivalent of Saturday and Sunday here. So
Oh, okay. That's well.
yeah. So I used to go to school on Saturday to Wednesday, and then Thursday and Friday is the weekend. And then all through my time in boarding school, like, it was confusing because I'd have to kind of switch back and forth between these two things. And then in Saudi, like if you're out shopping, they have the prayer calls, and then all the shops close.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah. So like all the shops close multiple times a day, and you have to make sure you get to the shop before prayer time, and just all those little things. It's just yeah, it's just weird because as a kid, like that was all just kind of normal to me, and then
Yeah. Yeah.
coming to the UK in itself was a little bit of a culture shock in some ways. So I was like, that was interesting getting both those elements though.
Yeah, yeah, that's actually that's pretty wild. I mean, like I think one big thing that was crazy for me was like we went from really hot climate in Pakistan to really
Mm,
cold climate in Canada. So I think one big thing is like I still remember the first time I saw snow, and it was a trip because I was like, what is this?
yeah.
Um, and then we had a lot of fun with it too, though. Like we would have we lived in Canada during some of the biggest snow years, like of the '90s, like the late '90s. There was just snowing nonstop. Um, so it was kind of wild to think about that, and it was like very strange. I know that there was little like cultural nuances that I didn't really pick up on at
I,
the
g-
time. I just kind of felt like this weird, like I was just kind of out of place with
yeah,
like
yeah.
how people behaved, how they spoke, what was allowed, what wasn't allowed. I definitely did some stuff that got me in a lot of trouble.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
yeah. I was like, and it was funny because my brother was always fine, but I was like, and it was this ignorance born of just innocence. Like I just didn't
Mm.
know any better. And I would just say stuff to people's faces that I wasn't supposed to say. Like there's certain things you could say in Pakistan that you can't say here, you know?
I want to know examples now.
Uh, I think like, oh man. I think like like one of my teachers was pregnant, and I kept commenting on like how fat she's like. I just think I straight up called her that in like parent teacher conferences or something. Like walking up with my mom, and it was just so bad. Like I think about it now, and it's just cringy. It's so bad to think
Oh
about.
no.
Yeah, it was terrible. It was really bad. And it was like I was 7, so it's like I should have known better, you know. It just looked bad on my parents' part. Like my mom's walking up and her son's calling his teacher fat when she's pregnant. She's not
Yeah.
fat, but you know, that was one. And then I think I had this really weird habit. This isn't as bad, but like if I was doing something and someone told me to stop, I would just kind of look at them like, is there something wrong with what I'm doing? Like genuinely asking.
Yeah.
And I think back now, and there was times where I did that, and it was like it was really rude. Like someone was just like, you know, like telling me to stop doing something.
Mm.
And it happened a couple of times with my cousins and my uncle when we were visiting. And then my uncle told me to stop doing something. We're at dinner with everybody, and I just said that to him, and it was like, and I just got slapped right across the face. Like it wasn't even, you know, because he thought I was challenging him, but I was this little kid I was like, I didn't know I was doing anything wrong.
Oh no.
So I don't know if that was cultural. That was just me being a dumbass. So I don't know if culture would fix that.
Yeah. That's funny, man. So like so in terms of the Amazon FBA stuff, man,
Yeah.
that's one of those online business models which I've heard a lot about, but haven't really looked into or ever dabbled in myself personally. But for people listening, I'm pretty sure there are some people going to be listening who know your expertise in that area and who are potentially interested in getting involved in it. So do you have some tips or pointers or anything that you can give to someone who's interested in getting started with selling products on Amazon?
Yeah, I think as cliche as it sounds, the biggest issue is uh, the biggest hurdle for most people is that they think themselves out of it. So if you want to do it, if you're interested in doing it, just get started. That's the biggest thing I can tell people, because it's a matter of when people really start to like get into their head about it. It's like anything else. I feel like they just kind of forget. They forget that they want to actually start, and they start to talk themselves out of it. Look at all these reasons that it won't work. But it's one of those things. Obviously, you can't just jump in without knowing what you're getting into. So I guess tips or anything like that would be like, do a little bit of research, and then do a little bit of homework and research, and then implement that and do your homework, and then kind of like do it again and keep like try something else. Do it like study some more, try it. Study some more, try it. I think that's kind of the biggest thing. Because most people, from what I've seen at least, most of the DMs that I get, like the number one question is just like, well, how do I do this? How do I do that? What do I look for? Like, and it's like most people are at step 0 and they're thinking about like step 20 or like step 50.
It's like,
there was a guy who, no, it's so good.
No, I was going to say it's the same as music. Exact same
right,
thing.
Exactly.
Exact same thing with music. I always get people messaging me like, yo, how do I get myself out there? Or how can I get signed to a label? Or how do I get my track on radio? Or the more common one, yo, let's do a track. Can we collaborate? And then I'm like, okay, like send me a sample of your music. And they'll be like, oh, yeah. I haven't actually made anything yet. And I'm like, kind of like, you're really putting the cart before the horse here, man. Like, I can't do a collaboration with you if you haven't even recorded anything yet. Like,
Right.
And you're asking for advice on how to get signed to a label before you've written a song. And I'm kind of like, dude, like, like do things step by step, man. But yeah, carry on.
Yeah. No, it's that's wild because it's like go produce like an EP or something like that.
At least
most people are. Yeah. People are at step 0 and they'll be asking me questions about like step 20, step 50. I think the best one was this guy who was he's a dope dude. He's actually like got a product. He's working on selling it and putting it up and everything like that. He kind of like got hit with a couple of setbacks. But he's getting his product back up there. He's already made some money, and he's in the UK. And he was like, "Which market should I scale to first? Like, what would you do?" And I was like, "I'd go to US, then China." I'm telling him what I would do based on my knowledge, and he's asking me specific questions about all this stuff. And I was like, "Are you making 7 figures on Amazon?" He's like, "No, dude, I've made like maybe 5 figures a year." I was like, "All right, don't worry about scaling to another country until you hit 7." You're taking up all this mental space talking about like, well, I want to expand to I'm like, it doesn't matter because you haven't tapped out your market yet. You haven't even learned the basics of this. You don't even know if this is really going to be a successful product based on what you want. So yeah, I think people definitely jump ahead. They don't kind of like look at the next step. And I think they kind of look at the mountain instead of like the mountain peak instead of looking at the path in front of them. Because it's another way to not do anything and not risk failure. So I think the biggest thing is just kind of being very pragmatic in terms of what's next and then taking that next step. And you kind of just keep doing that. And without realizing it, you're at the top of the mountain.
Sick, man. Well, I mean, one thing I have heard about Amazon FBA, like I don't know, again, I'm far from an expert. Maybe you can verify this, but I've heard some people make complaints about sort of having a product on there and then maybe the algorithms changing or the way that things are listed changing and stuff like that. And people's businesses kind of getting crushed overnight because of some changes that Amazon have put in the system. I don't know. Again, you're the expert here, but is that something that people need to be concerned or wary about?
I think to an extent. I don't think it's as bad as people make it out to be. One thing that happens that I know that screws a lot of people is they won't study Amazon's terms of service. They won't really understand what's allowed, what's not allowed. And then they'll do something that's not allowed. And when they get rolled up on it, then they get upset and they blame Amazon. And then they'll hate on the rules. They hate on like the fact that they have to go through the suspension or whatever it is. And it's like, it's not necessarily, that's not necessarily the problem. You kind of messed up by not, getting yourself into something you weren't aware of. And I've only seen that actually happen to one person where they got totally wiped out. And it was one product.
Yeah.
And it was very shady. It was basically like this guy was making a lot of money. It was a big market, but it wasn't very competitive. So it was ripe for the picking, and he found it. And one day he woke up and his listing was gone. And then by the time he got his listing pack up, Amazon already made their own product.
Oh no.
Yeah. And I think that was like, that's not like Amazon as a company. That's probably somebody at Amazon who saw the opportunity and then decided to go, do some, something shady. But in my 5 years that I've done it, I've known maybe one or two people that's actually happened to.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think you kind of like, if you're really an entrepreneur, if you're actually like resilient or anti-fragile, you got to be ready for that kind of stuff. You got to be ready for something to kind of hit you and change things up. You just never know where it's going to come from.
Yeah. So during your 5-year period, did you have any? I mean, what was the hardest part of it? Surely you must have had some serious obstacles and hurdles at some points. What was the most difficult thing, and how did you overcome it?
I think the most difficult on my end personally was trying again when my products kept failing. So the first 2 or 3 that I tried failed. The first 2 failed, the third one worked, and then the fourth one failed. But the first 2 failures, I didn't have a lot of money. I was borrowing money from like friends and family. And that was very difficult to kind of like do all this research and order samples and test them out and then try them on Amazon and put in all this work and then watch it just kind of like not go anywhere. So that was difficult. And there was a couple of times that I wanted to quit really bad. I wanted to quit multiple times.
Yeah.
But I kind of came back to it by thinking about like, it's one of those things like, if you're tired, you take a break, you don't quit, and understanding that I was learning with everything that I was doing and then kind of coming back to it. But as far as that's as far as like my own experience with it. And when it comes to the most difficult thing I dealt with overall, it was working for some like, I know you don't want me to cuss, so just working for some
bad people.
Yeah, very, very bad people. People who think that they need to be very sinister and mean-spirited to get the best work out of their employees, and that's definitely, I don't think that's the case at all. So I've worked with some very, very difficult people, which is very tough. When somebody can say no to whether or not you pay your bills the next month or your livelihood, that's probably one of the worst things ever.
Yeah, I take it that's one of the things that's driven you to become more of a sovereign individual and someone who's more, you use the term anti-fragile. So, someone who's more resilient to those kind of setbacks, and having someone who can control or pull the plug on you, which is never, I don't know. A lot of people I think are in that situation, but it's one of those things I've always been very wary of. From pretty young, to be honest. I've never liked the idea of, somebody just being able to be like, oh, you know what, we're just gonna like cut off your income source, or you did something we don't like, so like that's it. You're just completely at somebody else's mercy. So in everything I do, I've always tried to kind of avoid that, not have a single person ever that I just have to answer to. I just don't like that whole idea. I don't know. I guess most people are okay with it, but it makes me feel very nervous and concerned. I just don't like it.
Yeah, definitely. It's strange. I feel like most people say they don't like it, but like it's a different challenge to be on your own, because then it's just you. But yeah, it's something that I realized like, I think 1 or 2 years ago. It wasn't necessarily that I had. It wasn't like this anger or animosity I had toward an authority figure, but in my head, it was just kind of like, it's wild. Around the time, like my late teens, if I didn't want to do something, I never did anything I didn't want to do.
Yeah.
I would find a way out of it, even if it was like kind of like sneaky and weaselish or whatever. But now it's to the point where, and it's kind of problematic working jobs. Like I should have gotten fired at Ring. Long before I quit, because it was just like, I got to a point where like I automated most of what I was doing, so I didn't need to be there as much, but I was still salaried. And it was just funny because it was like, if I was told to do something I didn't want to do, I would just I would find somebody else to do it, or I would convince somebody. I convinced my boss multiple times he didn't need to do something because I didn't want to do it. So I don't want to do this, and I know you're gonna put it on me. So it's like I don't, and like that's my thing. Like, and I realize that's not conducive to having a job, because if somebody wants me to do something I don't want to do, I'm probably just gonna get fired, because I'm not gonna do it. And that sounds like a brat, like I sound like a bratty little kid or whatever it is. And that might be what it is, but it's just like, I think your soul dies a little bit every time you do something you don't want to do. So that's, yeah, it's that, and it's also that for me, where it's just like, I'm not going to do anything I don't want to do.
Man. I think it's very much just a personality trait. I think, like, especially people who are entrepreneurial minded tend to have, I don't want to say problems with authority. It might be that, but just, I don't know, there's something maybe within, like, I don't know what percentage of the population is entrepreneurial, maybe like 10% or so, but most entrepreneurs, you kind of notice that common thread of, like, just, wanting to be your own boss is one thing, but more just like, like, I'd rather do double the hours for myself for half the pay than, like, you know what I mean? Then be paid more by somebody else, but I've then got to, I've got to ask for permission to go on vacation, or I've got to ask for permission. I'm like, I'm a grown man. Like, I don't like the idea. You know what I mean? Like, if I want to take the day off tomorrow, I don't want to. Why should I need permission for that? Like, this again, you kind of said it sounds kind of bratty, but it's just like, it just is, you know what I mean? It's like, no, like, if I want to work the next 20 days straight, I'll work the next 20 days straight. If it's like, okay, well, I'm going to just, like, take a Friday off, like, and just hang out outside or whatever. I rarely ever do this, but, like, if you wanted to, it's like, cool, you can. If you're sick, it's like, okay, you take the day off. You just kind of, if one morning you're just feeling tired and you're like, oh, okay, all right, I'll just shift everything back a couple hours. It's like, it's just easy. I just think it's hard to put a value. It's hard to put a value on that, but it's very valuable to me.
Right, definitely. I think I'm sure do you know Naval? I don't know if you follow Naval on Twitter.
Yes, I do. Yeah.
Yeah. So he had a quote that like I didn't really like, after I was at Cabo for a bit last year, and then I would, like, November was around the time that Cabo and I parted ways, and I was living at my parents' place, and I was like, so technically I was unemployed for 2 months when I was setting all this stuff up that I'm doing now, and then a company reached out in January, and they offered me a really, really good job, but they were like, your hours are 7 to 3. You have to be here every day. You can only get this much time off. And I was like, the more they kept talking about, like, the salary was stupid good. Yeah. And I was about to say yes. And then they started telling me about the culture, and, like, every word was like, I don't want to do, like, it was like making me less and less want to, Yeah. And Naval had this tweet that just basically summed it up perfectly. He was like, anyone that gets a taste of freedom becomes dangerously unemployable. And that's so true, where I'm just like, you can't take my freedom away at this point. Like, I get to do whatever I want, whatever. Like, I'll still work. Yeah. I will gladly work, and I will hustle, but I'm not going to do it for you. And just the other thing for me too was, like, salary wise, I don't know what's, like, a lot, but, like, my starting salary at Ring was $55,000, and I just graduated college, and it was like, that's a pretty good starting salary.
Yeah.
I generated millions, multiple millions and millions.
Yeah.
And I saw none of it.
Yeah. It's crazy, man. I mean, I used to be a management consultant for a big company, and I remember one day, I don't think I was supposed to see this, but I saw like a document of what of how much the clients that you work for pay for you, right? Like the hourly rate that they're paying for you. And I saw it, and I was like, my salary was okay, but I was like, wait, hang on, like, they're charging, like, I was like, the percentage of this that I'm getting, I was like, damn, I'm expensive. Like, firstly, I was there, like, debating, am I even worth, like, am I worth this much? But I was like, well, I guess I must be, otherwise, like, the whole thing wouldn't work out. But yeah, I remember seeing that and then being like, this this is interesting. I mean, that's what business is, of course. You know what I mean? Like you've got to make a profit off of everything. So you're not going to pay an employee less. You're not going to pay an employee more than they are making for a company. But
Right.
yeah, I don't know. It's just it's very much a mindset shift. So yeah, I think that what was it you said? Did you say radically unemployable? Is that the phrase?
Dangerously unemployable.
Dangerously, yeah. I can relate to that. I've been doing my music full time for like 7.5 years now. And
Wow.
yeah, so it's not like everything is yet where I want it to be. But I'm working on that. It's making some big strides this year. But yeah, sometimes I just feel like, occasionally I get that thing where I'm like, oh, it would be nice to have like a stable, like a stable salary or something. But then like I think of everything else and I'm just like, nah, like I couldn't. You know what I mean? Like yeah. How did someone phrase it the other day on Twitter? Like, oh, they're like, yeah, dude, you've burned the boats already. Like you can't, you can't go back. Like you've sailed to this island and you've burned the boat. So like, just do you and you'll find a way, kind of thing. And I was like, yeah, that is kind of how it feels. It's almost a matter of, some of it's almost like a matter of pride. Like just like you said, they're giving you these terms and they're saying you must do this, you need to be this, and it all just like that salary very quickly. Like you're just like, because that's like they're probably not telling you everything either, right? You'll probably get there and there'll be like another list of.
Oh yeah.
You know what I mean? They'll say, 7 till 3, but then it'll be, but no, we need you this weekend. Well, we need you now from like 6 till 5. And it's like, this is starting to change,
Yeah, definitely. It's wild. That's funny because that definitely happens quite a bit. It happened like I had a really bad situation with that where it was like I was promised all these promised certain things, and then I got there, and this was for like some client work that I did where it was like, yeah, you guys definitely just said you would give me all this to get me here. And I was like locked in that position because it was like I couldn't leave because it was like at the time I was like let me take this on, and it was just like it was just bad and they do that. But yeah, it's wild, dude. It's wild to think about that. And like I think one funny thing too is that I don't do anything crazy. I don't do anything crazy on Twitter, but I can't imagine censoring myself because like I don't have I'm not at I'm not at Zuby levels right now. But I'm almost I'm not featured on Joe Rogan yet. But like someone that works for like one of my clients is a company, and one of the guys who works there came up to me today and he was like, he's like, I'm down. I'm even more down with you because I just found you on Twitter and I love what you're saying. And I was like, that's wild. I was like, okay, I'm getting to a point. This is a random dude. Like we don't talk at all. Yeah. So I'm like, I'm getting to a point now where like certain people are finding more and more people are seeing what I'm saying. And I can't imagine a company, like I can't imagine applying for a job right now and a company looking at my Twitter and being like, yeah, we want to hire this guy. outside of the Amazon stuff, I say some I don't say dumb stuff, but I clown on people and I troll people and they act like idiots. So
as you rightly should.
yeah, exactly. I can't as funny as you're not gonna get a job after your deadlifting video, dude.
Why not though? Like what was there was nothing wrong with it. It was not offensive. Yeah.
No, I'm sure it would I'm sure it would be funny. Most people would laugh at it, but it just takes that one person to be like, that's that Zuby guy. Why is he working here? I'm offended.
I'm offended. I'm triggered by his mere presence. He once said something I disagree with.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
there's no civil discourse anymore. It's either I don't care, or no, it's either I don't know about it or I'm offended. It's not like let's have a conversation. It's just,
yeah. Well, it's coming back, man. It's coming back. So many people feel like that I think the pendulum will swing backwards because it's so common. I mean, I get a lot of DMs and emails from people who are like, yo, I agree with everything you say, but I can't say it. Right? They're like, yeah, keep doing it, they're like, or there's stuff or like someone will like want to retweet me, but like they're like scared to retweet me because they've kind of cultivated like a certain thing, and they're like, oh gosh, if they bring that onto their timeline, then like they know who follows them and who you know. So it's so funny. There's like kind of all this self-censorship going on, and with me, I'm just like, okay, yeah, I think this, yeah, I think that,
yeah,
I think this, and it's just like, you know, it's an interesting experiment though. Like it's really interesting. Like the whole I was kind of talking about it with my parents over the weekend, funnily enough, like this whole self-censorship thing. Especially here in the UK, because you know, we don't have freedom of speech like enshrined in the law like you guys do over there. So, you know, there have been incidents where someone's tweeted something and then, you know, they get a ring from the police for like, you know, all right. Yeah. I don't know if you're aware of this, like, you know, because they're, you know, people are posting things on YouTube or on Facebook and on Twitter, and they're getting police knocking on their door, you know, saying, oh, you know, that was potentially offensive. I mean, can you imagine the police come in your door to say you made an offensive tweet? You're like, really? Like, shouldn't you guys be like solving crime? I mean, so some kid got stabbed down the street, man. Go like, what are you at my door?
Go handle that.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's crazy, and it's like even with because they've got this thing where it's not in every county in the UK, but it's like some of the police forces, they've basically been told to investigate this. Get this, it's a non-criminal offensive incidents. Right, so something that is not a crime but has the potential to be offensive. So it's literally like the thought police. So you're like, wait, but no crime was committed. They're just like, yeah, we know, but still, like you shouldn't have said that. And it's kind of like, well, like you're the police. The job is enforce the law. Like if I haven't committed any crime, then like leave that person alone. There was there was a case where it was like this one kind of went viral because it was like a 70 or 80-year-old woman who got like police attention for something that she wrote on Twitter, and it like became quite a big story, right? Because she's literally like this old lady, like this old lady sitting in her house who just like uses Twitter because she's like lonely and, you know, wants to put stuff out there, and like the police come and are investigating her, and you're just like, this is silly, man. Like, so yeah, I don't know, but I think by having these types of conversations, I think that I view it like a pressure valve. You know, I think like there's this pressure. That's what I really think happened with that deadlift tweet, right? I think it just kind of blew open, right? It's like so many people en masse have been like quietly thinking, you know, kind of like thinking this thing, and then it just kind of like blew that open, and everyone was just like I got so many messages from people who were just like, yes, finally somebody just like said like this is silly, like what's going on here, like but yeah, man, it's funny, like with it's so weird though, like with all other social media, I'm like, it's primarily just focused around my music or whatever. Twitter, I've just given up. I've just kind of given up on it being like about my music. It's just like, yeah, I'll post music there, but it's just like whatever. If some random thought comes to me after this thing and I think it's interesting, then it's going out there. Like it's like almost every day I'll do at least one tweet that gets like 500 to 1,000 likes. Just my brain just thinks of weird stuff.
No, it's like Twitter's. I love that about Twitter, and it's like everything you're saying is like right on point, dude. Because it's very refreshing. That's what I've noticed. Like. Because I think most people like it's and like growing up here, I was kind of more so always leaning to the left a little bit because it felt like the right hated Muslims and hated Islam and everything like that. But then I kind of realized over the last couple of years, I was like, no, they're totally full of it. Like they're propagating and pushing all this stuff that's like really making things worse. And I think the funniest thing was that one, it's very refreshing to kind of just speak your mind. And the craziest thing is one person does it, like you said, and then a bunch of people jump on and be like, yo, I've been thinking that. Yeah. And that's how I feel, but I feel like I can't say anything because I'll get attacked. And I think the craziest thing was like, I figured that all my friends were very liberal, you know, like, you know, whatever. And it was a couple months ago, we were all just hanging out one night at someone's house. And one of my buddies was like, he was a little drunk. And this is like right around the time where like everything transgender was really in the news really big. And he said something about that. And I think he said he didn't understand it, or he was like trying to ask questions. And then like everybody started talking about it. And at the end of the conversation, we all just kind of looked at each other. It's like, wow, man, I thought everybody was super liberal, but we're kind of conservative. I was like, this is not what I expected out of this group. Like, we're like, there's 30 of us, and like we throw a festival, like a music festival in the desert, and we get messed up, and like people come out, we're playing music and like psychedelics and everything like that. Like we're the most hippie. Like you think we're so hippie, and then it's like you actually sit and it's like, what do you think about this? It's like, I'm not really down with that.
Well, you know, I mean, like I don't know. There are certain ideas which, you know, I don't really like doing the whole left right thing because it's
Right.
overly simplistic. But there are a lot of bizarre ideas and concepts that are coming out of the left side of the political spectrum over the last couple of years, which I'm really just like not down with. You know, you would like some of these ideas. I'm just like, no, like this is just a bad. It's just a bad idea. You know what I mean? Like it doesn't make sense. Like where are your facts or your data to kind of back what you're saying? And it's just like, oh well, I feel this. I feel like I don't care what you feel. Like what you know what I mean? Like what's the biology saying? What's the data saying? What's the science saying? You know, I remember when people often criticize like people used to always criticize like conservatives and religious people in general as being like anti-science and being like anti, you know, being like anti, and now it's all turning around. It's like, and then also even with the whole free speech stuff, like I remember like in the 90s when it was the conservatives who were really like the moral busybodies who were trying to like police people's speech and you know, police people's actions and words, and you know, like it used to be they used to be more more like the modern day SJW types, right? They were the ones who were, you know, protesting against video games and protesting against Eminem and protesting against heavy metal, right? It was like that was all like the conservative side of the thing. And it's funny how it's kind of like spun around. So now conservatives are like defending free speech and, you know, like and are much more like laissez-faire, like, you know, well, if, you know, let people do what they want to do. And it's like all these other ideas with people trying to like control everyone else, like that's primarily now coming from the left. So it's like it's very illiberal, which is kind of ironic. So it's like it's called liberal, but I'm like, well, I'm not the one trying to police. I'm not trying to police people here. I'm just kind of saying like, well, let people do their thing, right? So it's who knows? It's weird times.
Yeah, very strange times. Yeah, I'm excited to see where we end up.
Yeah, well, you guys have an election next year, so.
Yeah, I mean, as much as I don't know. I was so anti-Trump when he was running.
Well, you're in LA. Like, you're in LA. You have to say that for your own safety.
That's definitely true, dude. I mean, anywhere in California, like LA is like the Bay Area is the worst. Where I grew up in the Bay Area, San Francisco, like it's like it's like hyper liberals over there. Yeah. But no, I was so anti-Trump, and I was because of all this stuff. Like I believed it, and then a couple 2 months ago, I'm talking to one of my buddies. He's Syrian, like born and raised here, but he's Syrian, and he has like a small American flag on his car, and he was like, "Dude, people give me a hard time. Like 2 people in the last week have given me a hard time for having the flag on my car." And it's like I live here. Like I'm not like for me repping the car. Like I live here. I grew up here. Everything happened for me here. Yeah. And then we started talking about Trump, and I was like, you know what? Like all the stuff we were all the fear mongering that was supposed to happen if Trump got elected, none of it happened. No. Like I know that everything's not great. I know that like one of my buddies was supposed to go to a wedding, and the wedding ended up getting canceled because the guy and the girl, they're from Iran, and their parents can't come because of the Muslim ban, which is so like the wedding's on hold, like it's just on hold indefinitely until their parents can come out because they want their parents there, which is like obviously you would want your parents at your wedding. So like that, you know, that doesn't personally affect me, but that is something that you know I got to be aware of. But
I thought that travel thing had been I didn't even know that was still in that was still in place. I thought it was rolled back quite quickly.
I thought it was too, and I think, but I guess it hasn't been. I don't know. Like I took his word for it, but maybe there's more to it. But if it is still in place, it's one of those things where it's like that's a real situation where it's like these people that's open discrimination against them.
Yeah, if that's the case, I mean that's one thing that's not. I thought off the bat that was like I don't live in the U.S. Like in general, in terms of the presidency, like from my angle, it looks like he's generally. I think he's certainly going to win a second term, and I think he should.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah, but yeah, I mean, I thought with that with the whole travel ban, I don't know all the details of it, but it was like I think I know what they were like trying to do, but it was far too heavy-handed. It's one of those things where you don't want to. You've got to be very specific with these things so that you don't end up having people's parents trying to go visit a wedding as like collateral damage. You know what I mean? It's like you've got to be very targeted and specific. You can't just be like, okay, like this whole bunch. Like yeah. But
no, it's wild, man. Like I learned some stuff. I took a political science course in college. This also kind of moved me away. I was never political to that extent, but I would kind of get triggered and talk about stuff. But there was just so many little things that kind of moved me away from it. And I think one big thing was I don't think it's like this in the UK. I don't think it's like this anywhere. But I learned about something called political theater in college, and our professor was telling us that there was a senator, I think, who was presenting something to Congress. And he was being filmed and he was presenting it. So you just see him talking the whole time. It's being televised on C-SPAN and everything else. And our professor was like, yeah, he talked for 3 or 4 hours. And what you guys don't know, you think he's presenting a bill to Congress. But in reality, nobody was in the room. The room was empty. Oh, he was just doing it. And like I was like, why? What's the point of him doing that? He was like, to use in his campaign. Like it's not real. But you guys don't know that. So he's just doing it. He just faked it for 3 hours to make his followers think he's doing something. And then he showed us all these examples of just like political theater. And he's like, most of what you guys see on TV and all, he's like, that's not politics. That's just meant to keep you guys like, and so like American politics are messed up in that sense, where it's like very, like everything's happening behind the scenes. The stuff that we see, it's like, that's like none of that, like 1% of that's real.
Yeah.
Which is nuts.
I compare it to WWE, like wrestling. That's how I look at American politics, because it's just like it's so like I guess sometimes people are like, dude, how come you comment on American politics but never on British? And I'm just like, British politics is boring, man. Like it's you don't have the characters. Like in the US, it's just like, look, whether you like or dislike these people, they're just like characters. You know what I mean? Like Trump is there like memeing and like, you know, like dissing people on Twitter. Like he like, you're like, dude, this is like after he got after the whole like no collusion thing came out and he posted that Game of Thrones meme. I was just like, I was like, dude, like this is amazing. I was just like, this is amazing. And people are like, this is so unprofessional. It's unprecedented. And I'm like, that's why it's amazing. Like, you know, maybe like I'm like, maybe because it's not my country, I can laugh at it more. But I'm just like, dude, that's just funny because there's no politician here in the UK that like posts memes, or you know what I mean?
They'd be laughed out of office. It was like you know, like it's nuts, dude. The U.S. is one of the most complicated governing systems ever. Like the best is like we've got the 50 states. So there's state government and then there's federal government. And like when Colorado first legalized weed, it was legal on a state level, but it was like federally illegal. So if you're like whatever the rules were, if you're just kind of chilling smoking weed, you're fine. But if a federal agent happened to be there, you could get locked up. And it's like it doesn't make any, like people who like guys that ran dispensaries and weed and like cannabis businesses, they had to do everything for a while. They had to operate entirely in cash because federal agents could seize what they could seize it. And it's like, they're not breaking state laws, but they're breaking federal. Like, you know, it's so weird. It's just like, what do you like the target just keeps changing.
Yeah.
So it's just kind of nuts to think about. It's so weird.
Yeah.
Like,
I think it seems to be a decent system though, as for from what I can gather, because at least you've got I mean, it provides like some flexibility, right? So that if you don't like the certain rules and laws in one place, it's like, okay, you can go to another state and you're still in the same country, but stuff is a
right.
little bit different. So if you don't like the way stuff is run in California and you're not happy with that, it's like, okay, cool. Like, you can go to Arizona or go to Texas or whatever the case may be.
Yeah. Arizona's great. You can do anything in Arizona.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I was in Arizona. Like my uncle lives there, and like California is very hard to get a gun.
Yeah.
In Arizona, you just we're just hanging out at my uncle's house one time, and he just walks up with like a rifle, and just walks up. He's like, "You guys want to go shoot these?" And we're like, "All right."
Yeah.
And then we're driving, and he was like, he's telling us, he's like, "Yeah, there's this big plateau, like this mountain up here. Once a year, people come out. They have a bunch of guns, grenade launchers." He's like, "One guy brought a tank one time." We're like, and then he was like, "All right, let's." Then he pulls off to. I was like, "Where are we gonna shoot these?" And he literally just pulls off to the side of the road, and we walk like 20 feet out into this canyon. We're just like, shooting guns off into this canyon right in front of us. I was like, well, "This is like, it's like the Wild West out here, dude." Like and they don't care. It's totally legal. You can do that.
And they don't have a lot of gun crime either, though. That's the funny thing, right?
No, because everybody's got guns.
Yeah, people always think like, because obviously in the UK, that there's no Second Amendment here, so people in the UK and Europe in general are always weirded out by the gun thing in America. And I actually know I've actually like looked at it quite a lot to try to understand it and listen to the different sides. And I'm always trying to explain to people, actually, it's the places with the stricter gun laws that tend to have more gun crimes and homicides and stuff. It's not the places where you can like be in Starbucks just like strapped. You know what I mean? Like you're just at Taco Bell with your AR-15 on your back, like just like it looks so bizarre. Like you see pictures and stuff, and you just see like these guys going around with these like huge, not even like a handgun, like a flipping like AR on your back, and you're just like, well, I guess. I mean, if you're not shooting anybody, then whatever, man. Like I don't. In theory, if someone's got a. I don't know why you need a tank, but if you're not gonna if you're not gonna use it, then I guess you could have a tank. Like.
Yeah, exactly. No, if you're like, and that's the thing that's like nutty about it is like it's like California. Most gun crimes committed in California are like it happens from guns bought in Arizona and Nevada. It happens from guns bought in other states, and people just drive over. Because they don't check like state borders. They don't check to make sure you're whatever, because it's yeah. But no, it's exactly that. Like you're not going to go to Texas and try to shoot something up, because as soon as you walk into Texas, there's like 8 people sitting there, like you see the holster, you see the gun, and you're just like, all right, dude, I'm not.
What do they say there? An armed society is a polite society. It does make sense. It's interesting. It's like, I guess it's one of those things where I guess, you kind of either go all the way that way or all the way the other way. You know what I mean? So like in the UK, it's like you've just gone all the way the other way. It's like, okay, look, nobody, not even the police, like nobody has guns, right? Or you go that way and it's just like, well, okay, I guess if everyone's got one or everybody can have one, then you'd be pretty stupid to try to go in one of those places and start trying to commit something. So
trying to shoot something up.
Yeah.
It's like it's weird. I think it's a conversation because like there's certain things that have happened that like the Vegas shooting was this guy was up and since I mean I think that like a practical conversation needs to happen and I hope it does. But some people say some like the dumbest, like my old roommate, like when the Vegas shooting happened, this guy was like 20, 30 stories up and shooting down at people with an automatic rifle. And one of my friends was like, he was like, if everybody at the concert had a gun, they could have shot him. I'm like, no, dude, that's a hotel. They're gonna kill like that many more. Like, can you imagine all those like, you know what I mean? Like, but like, there's some people just don't really think about it practically, and but it's like it's weird. It's a weird time, But it's definitely something. I used to be totally anti-gun. I'm still not. I'm not personally a fan of guns. I don't think I'll ever own one.
Yeah.
But if it's one of those things where it's like, hey, like more people being able to have them means that you see like violence going down, then I'd be open to it.
it's a weird one because it's also based on the area. You know, in rural areas, you know, if you live in like some ranch in Arizona or Texas where it's going to take the police like an hour to get to your house, right? And you're living off isolated, right? It makes a lot of sense to have a gun. Okay. But if you're like in a city, if you're in New York, if you're in LA, like it's more understandable, like, okay, like why you might not want everyone walking around strapped. So I don't know. Yeah. So it's a complicated one. I can understand both sides. Like I can see why to the average British person, for example, they just think the whole thing is crazy, but having spoken to a lot of very pro-gun people and, you know, seeing the arguments and seeing the logic and everything, I'm like, okay, it's different. Like it's very different. It's a different like mentality, or even, you know, the whole thing of like teachers being allowed to carry arms. Like people in the UK find that so insane, but I'm like, wait. I'm like, forget the emotion for a second. It does make sense.
Right.
Like for, you know, if you put the emotion to the side, it doesn't mean like, you know, the teachers are like running around like strapped in this. But if you did have an incident like where someone is walking around a school and they're just picking off people like sitting ducks, then if there was a teacher or a guard or somebody in there who's potentially armed, then it's like, well, you could probably stop them before they cause, you know, they can't just like walk around, stroll around the place at their own leisure, you know, picking people off. It's like, okay, no, suddenly, you know, they're going to get put down pretty quickly. So it's like, I get that. I get that. It's not an ideal. The ideal is you stop that thing happening before it reaches that level. Yeah. But it's, I don't know, man. I'm not an expert on all this stuff, man. But yeah, bro, just yeah, man. Just looking at the time, man. We've gone over an hour, so let people know where they can find you online. How can people follow you?
Sure. So I'm on Twitter at Amazon FBA guy. Give me a follow on there. That's where I'm mostly active. My Instagram is AWFTYY, and I'm not as active on there, but Twitter's the place to find me. I have a course available. I don't know if it's okay that I plug that.
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah. So if, everything start to finish Amazon. If anyone's interested, theamzmasterclass.com. You can learn everything. I have the course available right now for $497. But yeah, other than that, I'm super active on Twitter. So check me out there.
Awesome, man. Asad Shah, thank you for coming on to the show. This is Real Talk with Zuby.
Thanks so much. Thank you.